is that point where we were supposed to come to the end of the series, but that's not really going to happen. As we've been on this journey from Egypt to Canaan, from bondage to freedom, there have just been certain things along the way that have stuck out to me that I felt like I had wanted to share with you. And when we hit this point, obviously next week is Palm Sunday and then Easter, we are going to take a little detour, and next week we will sort of take a journey with Jesus to the cross, and then Easter from the cross. But on the other side of Easter, we'll come back and finish out a few more talks on this journey. Now, we've been in the book of Exodus over the course of the time we've been here. I think this is the 7th or 8th week. I can't remember at this point. But we're going to veer to the book of Numbers today, because there's a place once you move towards the end of the book of Exodus that their journey stops. But in Numbers and in Deuteronomy, there are a few other things that give you more detail about what transpires in their journey from Egypt to Canaan. And so they're too important for me not to hit, and so I want to do that today. Now, if you have not been with us, this group have been camped out at the mountain of God, Mount Sinai. And they have spent almost a year, about 11 months. And their time there has been rich. They've hung out in that place, not because this was supposed to be their final home, but they've hung out in this place because this was the place where they were going to receive from God the law, the commandments. Moses would go back and forth up and down the mountain, and he received from God the instruction that the people were to have so that they would know how to live, how they would know how to live with God and live with one another. They were largely, over the course of 400 years, living from a place of scarcity, living from a place of bondage. They had been slaves, and their fathers and their fathers and their fathers before them. So for years and years and years, all they had ever really known was bondage. And so they were spending about a year's worth of time where God was instructing this group of people, helping them to move out of that mentality. Because as we've said, you can be free and still be a slave. You can still, in your head, think the thoughts that you've always thought, even though the reality is you're free. Many of us know what that is like. And so what I've been asking you every week is, I want you to consider what it might be like to actually be free. What would it look like? What would it feel like if you were free from resentment? What would it look and feel like if there was no bitterness and unforgiveness residing in your heart? Because we know when that stuff lives in you, that you are the one who's captive to it. What would it look and feel like if you weren't afraid every day when you wake up, afraid? You fill in the blank of what you're afraid of. But what would that be like? What would it be like if I were free from having to not have to please you anymore? Having to find favor with all people so that I have to fake who it is when I'm with you because I'm afraid that maybe who I am is not. What would it like to be free? And that's what I wanted you to be in touch with. So God has the children of Israel here at Sinai, and He's trying to renew their minds. He's trying to get His word into them. He's trying to give them instruction. He's trying to give them direction. But there is this point where it's time for them to move on. They're not supposed to stay in the wilderness. They are headed for Canaan. They are headed for a land that is flowing with milk and honey. He just has to prepare them to be ready to enter once they're there. Now today, where we find ourselves in the book of Numbers is Numbers chapter 11 is where we'll start. Between where they are and where we will stop, which is Kadesh Barnea, it's supposed to be about 150 to 200 mile journey. The reason that there's such a discrepancy is they have a hard time figuring out where they were was and where they were headed was today. The places have changed, the names have changed. But basically it's supposed to be about an 11 days journey for them. Although it never really works like that, does it? Right? I mean, if it would have been a straight, direct route, they would have already been there. But now we're moving to 15 months, and they're still traveling through wilderness places. Now, all along the way, God has been trying to encourage the people to trust Him. He has provided for them at every step along the way. He has taken them through wet places on dry ground. He parted the sea and allowed them to go through. He destroyed their enemies, the people who were chasing them and who had held them captive. He has given them sweet water out of bitter. He has provided manna from the sky and quail to eat at every turn. But at every turn, they refuse to trust Him. Every time life gets tough for them, they turn back and wish that they had what they had when they were slaves. It's laughable if it wasn't so sad. And so here we are in chapter 11. They're going to move, and we're going to cover three camping spots that they move through. And I want to highlight a few things. Today we're going to be talking about the place of pain. Why God brings about pain in the life of the people He loves. Is He just mean? Does He just reach a certain place where He just throws His hands up and says, I'm done? Or does pain have a purpose? Is it possible that pain in our lives has a redemptive purpose from God that He wants to use in order to bring us to the place that He designed and made us for? And that's going to be our discussion today. So as they leave Sinai, they had gotten comfortable there. They're going to pick up and they're going to hit the harshest part of their journey. This next stretch is the most extreme no man's land they have to pass through. It is not a place that you would want to spend much time in, but they're going to travel through. When they hit the first spot, Numbers chapter 11, beginning in verse 1, it says, Soon the people began to complain about their hardship. And the Lord heard everything they said. Then the Lord's anger blazed against them, and He sent a fire to rage among them. And He destroyed some of the people in the outskirts of the camp. And then the people screamed to Moses for help. And when he prayed to the Lord, the fire stopped. After that, the area was known as Taberah, which means the place of burning, because fire from the Lord had burned among them there. This was their first stop. They had been traveling for 3 days, and as they traveled, they complained. I think the hope was that as God got His word into them, and they began to trust Him, that a lot of this complaining and grumbling and mumbling would stop. But 3 days in, they're at it again. Do I sound a little like a broken record every week when I stand up here? I mean, when you read this, it's like, at every turn, just one time, could they remember what God had done for them. But they can't. They don't. And so God sends down fire, whether that's lightning or whatever else. There are some people on the outskirts of camp who are killed. And I think to myself, gosh, that's harsh. Could He have put them in time out or something like that? Was there another way that He could have done it rather than just getting rid of them? Apparently there wasn't. But it gets worse. It doesn't get better, it gets worse. So they're there for 3 days, they then move on. Verse 4. Then the foreign rabble who were traveling with the Israelites began to crave the good things of Egypt. And the people of Israel also began to complain. If God had just rained down fire from the heavens and killed a number of you, would you be ready to complain within 24 hours? Or would you just even if you felt it, would you just stay silent? It's beyond belief. But here they are again. And so they said, Oh, for some meat. We remember the fish we used to eat for free in Egypt. Yeah, it was for free. And we had all the cucumbers and melons and leeks and onions and garlic. All that we wanted. But now our appetites are gone, and all we ever see is this. What is it? That's what manna was. That's what the word means. What is it? Now all we have is, what is this? They want a better diet, so they're complaining. Now, if this sounds like something you've heard before, it is. This happened in another place as well, the provision of manna and of quail. This is the second time we'll find it. We find it once in Exodus, we find it once in Numbers. It's not the same story, it's two different stories. It just sounds the same. Now this is funny, sort of. Verse 10. Moses heard all of the families standing in the doorways of their tents, whining. It's a couple million people. And the Lord became extremely angry. Moses was also very aggravated. And Moses said to the Lord, "Why are you treating me, your servant, so harshly? Have mercy on me. What did I do to deserve the burden of all these people? Did I give birth to them? Did I bring them into the world? Why did you tell me to carry them in my arms like a mother carries a nursing baby? How can I carry them to the land you swore to give to their ancestors? Where am I supposed to get meat for all these people? They keep whining to me, saying, 'Give us meat to eat.' I can't carry all these people by myself. The load is far too heavy. If this is how you intend to treat me, just go ahead and kill me. Do me a favor and spare me this misery." Is Moses at the end of his rope or what? Here's his leader. And he's just like, "I can't take it. Not another step with these people. Why would you do this to me? What did I do to deserve this?" So God's angry. Moses is angry. He just wants it over. And so God will perform for Moses something of a miracle here. He will take of the Spirit and he will place it upon a number of other people in the camp to divide the burden. He will give him help with the leadership of this group. And it's a good start. But Moses has had it. He's had it. Verse 18, God says, "Say to the people, purify yourself, for tomorrow you will have meat to eat. You were whining, and the Lord heard you when you cried, 'Oh, for some meat! We were better off in Egypt.' Now the Lord will give you meat, and you will eat it. And it won't be for just a day, or 2, or 5, or 10, or even 20. You will eat it for a whole month until you gag and you're sick of it. For you have rejected the Lord who is here among you. And you have whined to him, saying, 'Why did we ever leave Egypt?'" It's sort of funny, but it's really not. It's poignantly painful. Sometimes when God gives us what we want, it's not always best. But that's going to happen here. And you probably already know they're not going to be happy with it. He's going to give it to them, and give it to them, and give it to them until it comes out of their nostrils. Verse 31. Now the Lord sent a wind and brought quail from the sea and let them fall all around the camp. For miles in every direction there were quail flying about 3 feet above the ground. You just take a stick and just knock a quail out of the sky, right? 3 feet above the ground, they're flying. Here's God's provision. So the people went out and caught quail all that day, and throughout the night, and all the next day too. And no one gathered less than 50 bushels. They spread the quail all around the camp to dry. But while they were gorging themselves on the meat, while it was still in their mouths, the anger of the Lord blazed against the people, and he struck them with a severe plague. So that place was called Kibroth-Hattaavah, which means graves of gluttony, because there they buried the people who craved meat from Egypt. From Kibroth-Hattaavah, the Israelites traveled to Hazeroth, where they stayed for some time. First there's fire, then there's a plague. God is saying, I don't know whether you're getting this or not, but I'm leading you to the promised land. And I would have thought after about a year that you would have been better suited to inhabit it, but you're not even close. I have tried and tried and tried again. Remember back in Exodus 24 when they forged the covenant? And God said, here's the places of agreement that I made. And the people said, what? Everything that you have said we will do. Everything. I don't think they've done anything.
No.
Forget everything. Earlier in their journey, you will see that God is incredibly graceful to them. All they've ever known was slavery. And He knew that. He knew that their minds had to be renewed, that their lives had to be redeemed, so He's super patient with them for the first year. But once they hit this place of covenant, things change. They agreed, and under the law, that there would be responsibilities that they had in their relationship with God. And if they did not hold forth to those responsibilities, He would hold them accountable. And you will remember, if you were here, that God, several times before we get here, wanted to hold them accountable, but Moses interceded on their behalf and asked for God's mercy, and God relented. But there is some place as they enter this covenant relationship with God where He begins to treat them differently. Now, as we're walking through this, I want you to just think about the nature of pain in one's life. Perhaps you have like a wayward child. You're not really sure what to do with them. You've tried mercy and grace, and that hasn't seemed to work. And you've tried a number of other things. You're frustrated and at wit's end. You've tried tough love, but you don't even know what that means, or how that looks. At what point is there the kind of accountability that is called from that person who knows better? There is some place in the life of one who is under a covenant to be held accountable. Do you just let your son or your daughter just go and go and go until they plunge over a cliff themselves? I mean, what happens when you see somebody headed for destruction? What do you do? This is a question that some of us, very real world, in this room right now, are dealing with. What do you do when the life of someone you hold precious seemingly is headed towards a cliff? How do you stop that? God is trying, it's almost like a shot over the bow, warning them. You're headed for total destruction. You have at every turn disregarded everything I told you. There will be consequences for that. You're no longer ignorant. You know better. We spent a year together going over this. It's coming. And so with a little fire and a little plague, there are people who are destroyed. And you think to yourself, this is why I'm not so sure about God. This is why, like, these images in the Old Testament, they just bother me. Because when I read the New Testament and I read the Old Testament, it seems like a different God. It's not. Now, fortunately for you and I, we don't live under the law today. We have a new covenant forged in His Son, Jesus Christ, which we will talk about in a moment. But these people are living under the law that they agreed to. There were no secret terms. Everything you've spelled out, we will do. And if we don't, here's the deal. And now the deal has come. You move to chapter 12, and Moses' brother and sister get in on the action. Miriam and Aaron, they are complaining, and they're jealous that Moses has been the one to be the leader. They want to be the leaders. Have they been watching this whole disaster from the beginning? I would thank God that I wasn't the leader of this group of people. I would get to the back of the line and hunch low, hoping that He wouldn't look to me to raise up a new one. The last thing in the world President of the United States, right? It's the last thing in the world. Why would anybody want this? So Miriam, after her jealousy and her complaining, God strikes her with leprosy. And she's exiled outside of the camp. And for 7 days, she is a stranger and an alien. And Moses, once again, intervenes and says, I think she's got the picture, God. How about bringing her back? Moses wasn't angry. He wanted her back. Moses always forged in this wilderness place. And Moses always stood up and did the right thing. Sometimes it took him a while, but Moses was a man that God had been shaping and refining for this very moment. They bring her back. They restore her. They travel, and now they're en route to Kadesh Barnea. This is the place that is on the border, the southern border of Canaan. You can see the promised land from Kadesh Barnea. And what a sight that must have been. They had been traveling some 15 months and 400 miles. Can you imagine, if you're Moses, what it is like now to actually have it in your sights? You're almost there. Your responsibility with these people, it's almost over. You're not going to hear this complaining anymore. This manna stuff and this quail, it's going to be replaced. The land is plentiful. It's flowing with milk and honey. It is a rich land. It is a fertile land. You've been in the wilderness for a year and a half, and it's right there in front of you. And so God says, I want you to take and send 12 men, one representing each of the families of Israel, each of the tribes. And I want you to send them as scouts or spies into the land so that you can take a look and see what the land is like, see what the people are like, and then you can come back and report. This was meant to be an exercise just to give them a vision, just to give them a taste of what it is that they were moving into. And when they go, what they see is amazing. They can't believe their eyes. They finally come to this place that God had been promising them, promised their ancestors, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. The time is here. It's finally here. And so as they come back, what happens is they're excited and they share the good news. It says, we entered the land. This is Numbers chapter 13, verse 27. This was the report that they gave to Moses. We entered the land you sent us to explore, and it is indeed a bountiful country, a land flowing with milk of honey. Here's the kind of fruit it produces. And then they show them the fruit. Now, one of the places earlier, in verse 23, it says, when they came to the valley of Eshcol, they cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes, so large that it took 2 of them to carry it on a pole between them. Those are some honking grapes, right? I don't know. When I go to the grocery store, the little grapes, I don't need like a big pole and 2 people to carry out the grapes. A little baggie will do quite nicely. Big cluster on a pole between 2 people. So the picture is, this place is just loaded with stuff. And it's ready for them. But then what happens is this. Verse 28. They show them the fruit that it produces, and they say, the people living there are powerful, and their towns are large and fortified. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak, the Amalekites living in the Negev, and the Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites. They all live in the hill country. The Canaanites live along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea and along the Jordan Valley. So in other words, this is great, it's great, but we can't ever go in there. Now, you see what's happening with these guys? In 15 months, they've learned nothing about God. They've learned nothing about God. They have this incredible, beautiful land of promise that God had given them, and all they can see are the obstacles. Does that resonate with anybody? This very well could be a picture of your life. God freed you a long time ago, and He's leading you to a place of promise, and it is filled with bounty. And all you can see are the obstacles, and you're afraid. God knows what you're afraid of, but you're afraid. And as you look at and you listen to the story, I want you to look at and listen to your life for a little bit. Because this is your story. Unfortunately, for some of us, this is our story. But listen as they continue. Caleb, one of the 12, is going to stand up and say, haven't you people learned anything? I don't know what you see, but here's what I see. Verse 30. Caleb tried to quiet the people as they stood before Moses. He says, let us go at once. Let's not even wait a second. Let's go at once and take the land. He says, we can certainly conquer this. One person looks at their situation through the eyes of fear. The other one looks at the exact same situation through eyes of faith. One's ready to go forward. The others are ready to go backward. Which one are you? I mean, they are there. They are right on the border of the promised land. They're right there. Now what's going to happen is, this report that 10 of the spies give to the people is going to cause them to become so distressed that they're going to rebel. Shock. Listen to what happens. Chapter 14, beginning with verse 1. Then the whole community began weeping aloud, and they cried all night. 2 million. Their voices rose in a great chorus of protest against Moses and Aaron. If only we had died in Egypt, or even here in the wilderness, they complained. Who cares? If you're going to die, you're going to die. You might as well go for it. Why die in the wilderness? Why die in bondage? If you're going to die, you're going to die. Why not go forward and take a shot? They've sung this song for years now. It's been almost 2 years. Why is the Lord taking us to this country only to have us die in battle? Our wives and our little ones will be carried off as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to return to Egypt? They're actually contemplating returning to Egypt. 15 months later. Then they plotted among themselves, let's choose a new leader and go back. Then Moses and Aaron fell face down on the ground before the whole community. 2 of the men who had explored the land, Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh, tore their clothing. They said to all the people of Israel, the land we traveled through and explored, it's a wonderful land. And if the Lord is pleased with us, He will bring us safely into that land and give it to us. It is a rich land flowing with milk and honey. Do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land. They are only helpless prey to us. They have no protection, but the Lord is with us. Don't be afraid of them. They're on their faces. They're begging them. Just once, one time in your life, show a little faith. God is with us. God is for us. Let's go forward. And what do you think they did? Here's what they did. Verse 10. But the whole community began to talk about stoning Joshua and Caleb. The only people who had any faith, and they want to get rid of them. I find this to be the truth that when you're surrounded by people who don't have any faith, those who do are considered weird or strange or dangerous, not welcome. And that's the case here with Joshua and Caleb. Can you imagine being them and wandering with these people, finally being free, wandering with these people, and you get to the edge of your dream and it's like, nope. But we're ready. We can do it. Then the glorious presence of the Lord appeared to all of the Israelites at the tabernacle. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? Will they never believe me, even after all the miraculous signs I have done among them? I will disown them and destroy them with the plague. And then I will make you into a nation greater and mightier than they are. You know, this had already happened once. God wanted to just start over. And now he's here again. And what does Moses do? He prays. And he begs God, please, please, for your name's sake, don't do this. And God relents. Sort of. He doesn't send the plague, but he gives the people what they want. And it ends in destruction. And I just couldn't help but think, what happens when God gives us what we want and it ends in destruction anyway? See, he's at this place where he's been firing warning shots over the bow. He's been trying to tell them, please, don't do this. I have this place for you. I have this idea of who you are and who I want you to be. And you can grow into that. And I am with you and I am for you. But at every step along the way, you always want to settle for something less. You always want to be afraid. You always want to step back. You always want to complain. You always want to exert some level of non-belief. And we've been working on this a long time, and I've been trying to help you, and I've been patient, but my patience has run thin now. Moses intercedes, and he spares the people from the plague, but this is probably the darkest part of the entire story. Chapter 14, and this is where we'll finish. Then the Lord said, after Moses has prayed, I will pardon them as you have requested. But as surely as I live, and as surely as the earth is filled with the Lord's glory, not one of these people will ever enter that land. They have all seen my glorious presence and the miraculous signs I performed both in Egypt and in the wilderness. But again and again and again and again, they have tested me by refusing to listen to my voice. They will never even see the land I swore to give their ancestors. None of those who have treated me with contempt will ever see it. But my servant Caleb has a different attitude than the others have. He has remained loyal to me, so I will bring him into the land he explored. His descendants will possess their full share of that land. Now, if you're Moses, this just has to cut you to the quick. Verse 25. Now turn around and don't go on towards the land where the Amalekites and the Canaanites live. Tomorrow you must set out for the wilderness in the direction of the Red Sea. And they will travel for 40 years until a generation of unbelief dies out. I have come to see that in our lives, God will inflict some pain in order to help us avert disaster. And we don't like it. When we read of these places, we like, how could God do that? Why would God do that? Well, let me ask you, after all that time and all He had given them, what other choices did God have? Really? I want you maybe to think about that. What choice does God have with me when I resist and refuse and deny and complain and complain and complain and complain? At every turn after his provision, I suddenly get amnesia, and the next place I get to, I complain about being back in the place I didn't want to be in the first place. Does that ever happen? You're miserable where you are. Finally, you are relieved and led to a new place, and then you look back at the old place as if that was like the good old days. And that's what's happening here. Wherever it is that they were was terrible. Oh, Egypt was great. Great! You were a slave for 400 years. You didn't know you couldn't get up on your own. You couldn't go to bed on your own. You had to make your own bricks. That was even doubled and tripled and quadrupled what you were supposed to put for output. I mean, at every turn it was a miserable state, and yet they get to this place and they say, gosh, I wish we could go back there. You ever do that? And Caleb just says, hey guys, how about one time? We're right here. I mean, what else do we have to lose? Really? This place, did you see those grapes? I mean, and there's more like that, way more like that. Could you one time just look at something with just a little bit of faith? Just a little bit. Because when you look at something with faith, it enables you to understand something that is true. That is this: the one who created you, the one who made you, designed you for purpose and has a plan for you. And if you will cooperate with that plan, your life will go much better than if you don't. Let me ask you, which one's better or worse? To be destroyed by fire or plague, or just wander around in the wilderness for the rest of your life and die out? Which one's better or worse? I don't really know the answer to that question. You like a quick death or just a slow, lingering, long one? Which one would you like? At some point, there is accountability for the relationships we have with God. God takes his agreements with us very seriously. When I look back over the history of this journey with the Israelites and God, what I see is that God is in the earliest days, he's very gentle and tender. And he nurtures them, and he gives them a break, and he gives them a break, and gives them a break. But at some point, when they know better, and they still don't do better, God says, okay, you're getting ready to head over a cliff. I'm going to give you about as much warning as I can give you, but at some point, I'm trying to help you avert this disaster. Now, you're going to listen or you're not going to listen. And at some point, you see, most of them didn't listen. And what happened? What was the end result? They never got to experience all that God had for them. They died in the wilderness. They headed back towards the Red Sea. Can you imagine being Moses? Moses and Caleb and Joshua, they hadn't done anything. They wanted to go forward. But because of the majority, they had to go backwards. That's the saddest part of the story to me. That's worse than fire from the heavens or plague or any of that stuff. It's right there in your sight. And now you got to turn and go in the opposite direction. Now that kills me. That's what happens when I think about my life or your life or our life. You're just like right there. Are there obstacles in the way? Yeah, definitely, no question. There are giants in the land. And now's the point where the Word of God says to us, so what are you going to do? You going backwards or are you going forward? You're going to die. Right? You're going to die. At some point, you're going to die. I'm just breaking that to you. It's going to happen. So why not take what you have, what remains of your life, and be courageous, and be faithful, and step into the best of what God has for you. He's with you, and He's for you, and He's tried to show you that in so many places along the way. Why not have a different life than the life you've had? Why not be free? Why not experience God's best? Why not choose life? The alternative isn't nearly as good. And I just see Caleb and Moses and Joshua just pleading and on their faces, pleading. They just wouldn't take it. Because their fears were greater than their concept of God. I just want to say to you, why not just express a little bit of faith today? I don't minimize your giants for a second. But why not just approach them with the understanding that God is with you? His arm is not too short. And He is for you. None of us like pain. But a lot of times we bring it on ourselves. Because we know better. And we still keep doing the same stuff over and over and over. And at some point God just says, I think that's enough. I think it's enough. Why not choose life? And that's where we end today. It's the saddest part of their entire journey. They're standing right on the verge of going into the place God had made for them. And they just won't go forward. And I would say, don't make the same mistake. Don't do it. I'm giving you that warning now. Don't do it. There is nothing for you in Egypt but pain and hardship and difficulty and bondage. There's nothing for you there. The only place you have to go is forward. So why not do it? I promise you, moving forward is a far better way to go than moving backwards. Shall we pray? Lord, as I wrestled with your word this week, sometimes you do come across as pretty harsh. I mean, some of these passages are a bit terrifying. But I thank you for helping me to understand them a little bit in light of the covenant we share this day. God, I thank you that the law simply now points us to our own sin, but it's your Son, Jesus Christ, who frees us from sin and death. I thank you that we operate under a new covenant given to us through Him. I thank you for grace and mercy, and I ask that as we open our hearts to you this day, that it would be applied to us in the places that we most need it. I realize what a sinner I am, and how much I need you in my life. And I ask that as we move from this place to the next, that we would open our hearts and our minds, and we would choose faith. We would invite you to join us on the journey, to guide us and to lead